Welcome back to Mega Movie Drive-In, everyone. Season 3. We got a lot of badass movies set up for you guys this season. Well, some are badass. A couple might just be ass. Hey, as you can see though, I still got my badass high-speed GTO. And we're here at the drive-in. The budget department's a little lacking. We're gonna work on that for later. Anyway, what movie we got up today?
Our first batter up is The Blob. This pile of alien afterbirth was directed by Ivan S. Yearworth Jr. from 1958, and it was released on September 10th by Paramount. Ah, the 1950s. Nothing like lead-based paint, everything covered in butter, Coca-Cola made with real Coke in it, and the fear of the Cold War. Oh, and monster movies. That's why we're here. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we go once again. Let's get ready to scream.
All right, kid, the show's over. It was a cute act, but this time it didn't work.
Yeah, I should just let that go. At least you get this kick-ass opening tune. Catchy. Our movie begins with our two main characters smooching on Lover's Lane. This is Stephen Andrews, played by Steve McQueen, and Jane Martin, played by Antoinette Courcelle. And she's kinda not happy that Steve can't remember her name.
Now, what you think, Janie girl?
My name is Jane. Just Jane.
Hold up.
Just then, they see a shooting star crash into Earth, and they jump in their car and head out after it. The meteor lands near an old man's house. The old man is played by Olin Howland. The old man does not have a good experience with the Blob. He's picked up by Steve and Jane and brought to Dr. Howland, played by Stephen Chase. The doctor is getting ready to head out of town to head to a convention with some other doctor friends.
That will come back into play later.
The doctor gets to work on the old man and sends Steve and Jane back up to the road where they found him to see if they can figure out anything else.
But that gets sidetracked.
Steve's gang of buddies show up and they challenge him to a race because they saw him speed past one of the stoplights earlier. This is Mooch Miller, played by James Bonnet, and Tony Grissett, played by Rob Fields, and other guy nobody cares about. Unfortunately for Steve, he gets busted by Lieutenant Dave, played by Earl Rowe. He tells them to cut the shit, and they get off pretty easy. They head up with the others to where they found the old man. All they find is something left of the meteor that the Blob came in, and the old man's dog. Back at the doctor's, he calls in some help. He calls in his assistant, Nurse Kate, played by Lee Payton. She discovers the Blob has absorbed the old man, and it wants more. They try a few things like acid, which doesn't seem to work too well. The Blob gets Kate, while the doctor runs for his gun. The doctor tries the gun on the Blob, which doesn't go very well. The doctor gets eaten just as Steve and Jane come back with the dog. Unfortunately, again, Steve is the only one to witness this, so they head to the police station to meet back up with Dave and the other two cops. Chess-playing Officer Richie, played by George Cares, and the bad cop, Sergeant Jim Burt, played by John Benson. They tell them the doctor is dead, and of course the police really don't believe them. Dave heads over to the doctor with them to check out what happened. The place is a mess, and Sergeant Burt says, "These kids are just full of shit, man. Come on. They planned this whole thing." And then,
Who's on out here?
the neighbor, Mrs. Potter, played by Eleanor Hammer, comes in. She pretty much explains to everybody that the doctor had to have taken off and went to the convention with his doctor buddies, and she's watching the house for him.
Just came back into play.
So Dave hauls the two kids in, calls their parents, and both parents show up and take the kids home. Before they leave the station, Steve tells Jane he's gonna...
Get out of the house as fast as you can. I'll be over.
We unfortunately have to meet Jane's little brother. This is Danny, played by Keith Almoni, who creepily looks like my dad as a kid, actually. Once we get through all that, Steve meets back up with Jane, and they try to grab the gang so they can go around town and warn everybody about the Blob.
Steve and Jane look a lot older than these kids, but I'm just throwing it out there.
No one in town really gives a shit or believes the kids. Luckily, Jane and Steve find the little dog inn outside of Steve's dad's store. They find something else. They escape into the freezer of the store, where they find out this thing doesn't like cold too much. They need to get the town's attention to prove that the monster exists, so they make a shit ton of noise.
That's an air raid. Fire!
Once the whole town shows up, and Lieutenant Dave and the other cops, Steve is really trying to convince them now that they're not fucking around. Now, while they're getting ready to raid the supermarket, the Blob is actually at the movie theater across the way, and it is way bigger now. After escaping the movie theater, the Blob kind of becomes the hero and goes after Danny, who's hiding in the diner. But unfortunately, again, Jane and Steve are also in there with the owner and a cook, or a waitress, not really sure who's who. They try to drop a power line on it to shock it off. No dice. In a last-ditch effort, it turns out CO2 will freeze the thing. So Dave sends the rest of Steve's gang to head to the high school to grab as many fire extinguishers as they can find. The kids all come back, along with everyone they know. And are able to move the Blob off the diner and save the people inside. Now, what do we do with it? The Air Force decides to drop it in a container in the Antarctic, never to be heard from again. The Blob is definitely one of those movies everybody knows. Such a simple concept made into a terrorizing villain. The special effects of this movie are done very well for its time. The acting isn't horrible either. From time to time, they try to use comedy.
Understand, we may want to check here for fingerprints later.
Can't I just dust around the fingerprints?
But it's not too god-awful. Jane's acting bothers me a little bit, like she doesn't want to be there. And so does Steve's, but they still do a pretty good job. The Blob, I think, is pretty well known, almost as much as Godzilla or King Kong.
It's also loosely based on a true story, too. Apparently back in the 50s, a couple of cops found some star jelly, which is what they call that comes down from the sky after a meteor shower, out in a field somewhere in Pennsylvania, and when they picked it up, it just dissolved in their hand. But it made big-time news when it happened.
So everyone needs to check out The Blob. It's great fun.